So we've all heard of Prop Drops and we've all heard of SUPERthrive, but which product is actually the best at getting your plant propagations to root? The answer might surprise you. Hello everyone, I'm Botanically Insane and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be comparing 4 of the most popular water propagation aids to get to the bottom of which method is actually the most effective for rooting new propagations. But first, let me introduce you to these 4 methods and supposedly how each of them are supposed to work. The first product is one you've probably seen marketed all over TikTok, and that is the Prop Drops Root Growth Accelerator by Market Botany. So supposedly these are supposed to work just how it sounds. So you put 3 to 4 drops in 16 ounces of water, and it's supposed to speed up your root growth. The active ingredient in Prop Drops is indole-3-butyric acid, which is basically a synthetic plant hormone that regulates root growth and development. And we'll be comparing the IBA found in Prop Drops to the next method, which is actually just your plain Pothos cutting. Now you may have heard that putting a pothos cutting in your propagation water speeds up the rooting process of any other plants in the same jar. Turns out that pothos contain an excess amount of naturally occurring rooting hormone called IAA. And so it's basically the naturally occurring form of what's in Prop Drop. Synthetic rooting hormone, naturally occurring rooting hormone. The third method we'll be comparing is SUPERthrive Vitamin Solution with kelp. Now, this product has received a ton of attention over social media, and depending on who you ask, this is either a miracle solution or complete snake oil. All of the wild claims about this product do seem too good to be true, and the only active ingredient in SUPERthrive, other than a really small amount of nitrogen, is vitamin B1. So far, the scientific research doesn't really support vitamin B doing much for plants, so this will be interesting to see if it has any effect at all. The last product we'll be comparing is one that's lesser known, but this is the General Hydroponics RapidStart. This has really good reviews, but despite looking through the ingredients and all the documentation, I couldn't actually figure out myself how this was purported to work. But I contacted the company, and despite the reply being in broken English, I was able to figure out that this product doesn't actually contain plant hormones, but instead contains undisclosed botanical extracts and minerals that are supposed to aid root growth and development. One of those mechanisms being transform juvenile plant cells into root cells. I'm not a scientist, but it's a different mechanism of action from these other ones, which are either rooting hormone or vitamin B. So here's how this experiment is going to work. I'll be adding the recommended amount of each product into 12 ounces of water, which I have measured out here. The Pothos Cuttings, I couldn't actually find any information on how much hormone would be emitted per cutting. So I'm gonna do one condition where we have just 1 cutting and a second condition where we have 3 cuttings, just to see if there's any difference. In each glass, we have 1 Synapsis cutting, and I have tried to grab cuttings that are approximately the same size and maturity as much as I could. They've already calloused over. And then for a control condition, I will just have 1 single plain glass of water, just to see if any of these actually work better than just plain H2O. Now, all of these glasses will be placed in my greenhouse cabinets just to try to make the conditions as equivalent as possible. Obviously, we're trying to be scientific as best we can. I will be checking back on these each day to measure the roots and just see how they're progressing. Could be a lot of different factors here, so I'm just gonna be measuring the number and the length of roots that emerge and on what days, and then we'll compare them. So it's been about a month since I started this experiment, and oh boy, the results are juicy. First, let's just take a look at the plain H2O cutting. The cutting produced 2 roots, each about 1 inch long. Now for this experiment, I did not change out the propagation water because I wanted to measure the effect solely of my conditions, but also because I feel like it mimics real life, where a lot of times we forget to change our propagation water. But the H2O condition was the only one that started to develop root rot. And if you were to subtract the length of the rotted roots, you'd probably get about 1 inch length total in root growth. Now let's look at the pothos cuttings. Now, regardless of the number of pothos cuttings we put in each glass, each Synapsis cutting only produced 1 root at about 1 inch in length, so pretty comparable to H2O. But ironically, the pothos cutting ended up producing the most roots, so not really what I was going for, but good to know. All right, now getting on to the good stuff. So for Prop Drops, in terms of root length alone, Prop Drops was the clear winner. This one absolutely took off and produced a root measuring 5 inches in length. It was healthy with no signs of rot, and it looks like it's actually about to start producing secondary roots, which is pretty cool. Now moving on to RapidStart. Despite not containing any rooting hormone, this one also did really well. It produced a single root measuring 4 inches in length, so just a little bit shorter than Prop Drops. Something about the RapidStart solution you may notice is that it is very green. and that is because it has algae growing in it. Out of the 3 products I tested, RapidStart had the highest levels of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, which are the 3 primary nutrients that plants need to grow. So I hypothesized that there were simply more nutrients than the small little cutting could uptake, and so algae was able to grow and reproduce pretty easily. Obviously, it didn't affect the health of the cutting, it's just something to notice. Now let's see how SUPERthrive performed, and honestly, this shocked me. SUPERthrive did absolutely nothing. Okay, it did produce a little nub of a root, maybe like 1/8 of an inch long, but it did substantially worse than all of the conditions, including plain water. I was not expecting SUPERthrive to perform amazingly, but I was not expecting it to perform worse than plain H2O. So that one was a shocker. So what can we conclude from all of this? First off, I think we can conclude that putting Pothos Cuttings in your propagation water is not gonna significantly speed up the rooting process of your stem propagation, which is kind of a bummer since it's the only free option, but it is what it is. Now, maybe there's a scenario where if you put like a ton of cuttings in there, maybe it would have an effect, but it doesn't really make sense to cut up an entire plant just to speed up the rooting process of another. Moving on to things that actually work, I think we can conclude that both Prop Drops and RapidStart significantly do speed up the rooting process for stem cuttings. So if you're spending money on them, rest assured you can sleep peacefully at night knowing it's not just a placebo effect. But knowing what I know about these 2 products, I would reach for them in different circumstances. So Prop Drops did work the best overall, probably because it contains the plant hormone that's responsible for triggering rooting. So it's what I would reach for if I had a new stem propagation and wanted it to root faster. However, if you have an established plant with an existing root system that just needs a little bit more support, that's where I would reach for RapidStart. Other studies have shown that long-term use of plant hormones like the ones found in Prop Drops can negatively affect the health of your plant. And I don't know if you can see this on camera, but the leaf quality of the leaf on the stem cutting that's in RapidStart is a lot healthier than the leaf that's in Prop Drops. Again, that doesn't really matter for a propagation, but if you have a large plant, you probably care about keeping the leaves looking nice. I personally use RapidStart when I'm transitioning a plant from soil to leca or pon, and I find it works great for that. Lastly, it begs the question, is SUPERthrive bad for your plants? I personally don't think we can say that. I think what we can say is that SUPERthrive alone doesn't contain the ingredients needed to create the environment for a stem propagation to begin rooting. It does contain nutrients that plants need, don't get me wrong, and actually my favorite fertilizer, Foliage Pro, contains SUPERthrive and my plants do amazingly, so it's not that it's bad for plants. It's just that SUPERthrive alone is not going to encourage a stem cutting to start producing new roots. It's the wrong tool for the job, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And those are the results of this experiment. I'll link Prop Drops and RapidStart down below. They are affiliate links if you want to check them out. And let me know in the comments if these results match your predictions or what planty experiment I should conduct next. But hey, if you liked this video, make sure to check out this one. Bye!